This video lecture is entitled Pluralism and Christian Ethics. This video lecture is for the course Christian Worldview and Biblical Decision-Making at the East Asia School of Theology. So in this video lecture, we're going to be talking about what pluralism is and how we as Christians should live in our pluralistic world. While there are many distinctive aspects of our modern world, pluralism is one of the most obvious and pressing aspects in the world today. There are several historical developments that have encouraged the rise of pluralism, including geographic mobility. Never before have so many people been able to travel so far in so little time. So we have people literally traveling all over the world in record numbers. Another factor promoting pluralism has been information exchange. Beginning with the telegraph, the rise of global technologies has led to the exponential proliferation or spread of information exchange. What happens in one part of the world can now have almost real-time, immediate consequences in many other parts of the world. We also have the rise of cosmopolitan centers, that is, global cities. What all of this does, the rise of cities, is to create new sociological realities where people from widely divergent communities with widely divergent or different ways of understanding and living in the world now live in close proximity to one another and significantly interact with each other in regular and ongoing ways. And this in turn results in the kinds of challenges we'll be talking about in this video lecture. But first, we need to answer a key question. What exactly is pluralism? Here's a very good definition of pluralism. Pluralism is the existence of different types of people who have different beliefs and opinions within the same society. Now, here's how Dennis P. Hollinger explains pluralism. He says, pluralism does not primarily refer to differing races, ethnic groups, nationalities, and cultures living side by side within given communities or society as a whole. Within this matrix, something more profound occurs. There is the socio-cultural reality of discrepant worldviews, ideologies, and moral frameworks existing side by side. This raises two apparent dilemmas, the truth dilemma and the social dilemma. Now, notice one very important point that Hollinger makes here. He states that he says that the fact that different races, different ethnic groups, different nationalities, and different cultures living side by side is not what constitutes pluralism. So just because you have people of different ethnic groups, different races, and even different cultures living side by side, that is not what creates pluralism. Now, this setting is often the context within which pluralism arises, but it does not by itself equate to pluralism. Instead, pluralism exists when different people within the same society have different beliefs and opinions. Let me state that again. Pluralism exists when different people within the same society have different beliefs and opinions. In other words, you can have different people from very different backgrounds living side by side in the same society, but if they have the same beliefs and the same opinions, then you don't have pluralism. Pluralism exists wherever you have people living side by side who have different beliefs and opinions. Pluralism raises some very important questions for us. How does the reality that we live in a society that now holds so many different views of reality and ethics influence us as Christians in our attempt to live ethically and to persuade others of the truth and goodness of the Christian view of life? So in this video lecture, we'll explore these issues and try to find some answers to how we can respond to the challenges of pluralism. So there are two dilemmas of pluralism that Dennis Hollinger spoke about. The first is the truth dilemma, and the second is the social dilemma. So here's what the truth dilemma is. The truth dilemma has several aspects. First, the presence of many perspectives on truth leads to the belief that all claims to truth are only points of view and nothing more. In other words, for example, when we talk about different religions, we say one religion says there are hundreds of thousands of gods. Another religion says there's only one God. A third religion says there is no God. But so you have these people with very different viewpoints about God. So pluralism says that, all of these religions are leading to the same place. They're all just rivers leading to the same sea. So it really doesn't matter what one religion says or what another religion says. They all teach the same thing anyway. That's the first problem with the truth dilemma. The second problem with the truth dilemma is that any claim to universal truth are considered suspect, arrogant, and narrow-minded. So to go back to talking about religions, Hinduism says there are hundreds of millions of different gods. Buddhism, classical Buddhism, says there is no God. Islam says there is only one God, but it does not recognize Jesus as the Son of God. Christianity says that there is one God who exists as three persons, and Jesus is the Son of God. Now, you look at all these claims, and objectively speaking, everybody can't be true. Everybody can't be correct. You can't say there are hundreds of millions of gods, no God, and one God, and have all of these claims be true. That is illogical. But yes, notice what the truth dilemma says. Notice what modern pluralism says. Modern pluralism says any claim to universal truth are considered suspect, arrogant, and narrow-minded. And this is one reason why we as Christians do encounter hostility in our world today, because as Christians, we proclaim what the Bible teaches, which is that Jesus is the only way to eternal life. And so because of that, people consider us arrogant and narrow-minded. And this leads to the third part of the truth dilemma, which says instead of all truth, instead of having universal truth or any one truth being the truth, what pluralism says is that all perspectives of truth should be considered equally valid. All perspectives of truth should be considered equally valid. That is the truth dilemma with pluralism. So pluralism poses problems about the question of truth. What is true? Pluralism also poses problems for society. This is the social dilemma. And the question here is, how can Christianity effectively relate to and advocate its viewpoint within the context of so many different and competing worldviews? And the second question follows the first. What can provide social cohesion to a society when there are so many competing points of views within it? And these are questions. So the first question is for Christians. How can we effectively relate to and advocate Christianity within the context of so many different and competing worldviews? The second question is for society as a whole. How can people live together peacefully when there are so many different competing points of views within society? So this second question is a question that faces many societies in our world today, especially multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious societies such as Singapore, the United States, Canada, England, and so forth. So let's talk about different options for Christianity in a pluralistic society. The first option that Christians have is the privatization of Christian faith. In this view, religion is considered a legitimate private practice, but it should not seek to push itself into the public arena of social and legal policy formation. Okay, so basically, when religion is privatized, people say it's okay if you want to believe Christianity, as long as it doesn't affect the rest of society. Now, there are two basic versions of this view, one from a Christian perspective and one from a secularist perspective. The Christian perspective on the privatization of Christian faith is the fact that throughout Christian history, there have been a good number of Christians who have advocated Christian separation from the world. In this version, Christians see involvement in certain aspects of public society as a means of corrupting and destroying Christian purity and faithfulness. So these Christians would say the best way to remain pure is to separate oneself from worldly pursuit and contacts. Monasticism and fundamentalism, as well as certain segments of the Anabaptist movement, namely the Amish, are rooted in this kind of separatist approach to Christian living in the world. Now, let me just point out that separating from the world is not always a bad thing. There may be a time and place to do that. But we also should be aware that when we separate ourselves from the world, this may not be good for the rest of the world, because then when we separate ourselves from the rest of the world, we're also keeping our Christian witness to ourselves. So there are good and bad aspects to this approach. The second approach to the privatization of religion comes from a secularist point of view, and that is non-interference of religion in public policy. This is by far the most powerful element in today's society and comes from a point of view that is often called strong or hard secularism versus soft secularism that allows religion to be considered in public policy but have no pride of place in that public policy. So soft secularism says we will consider religious belief, we will consider people's religious sensibility, but we will not give it first place in determining public policy. That's soft secularism. But hard secularism says that religion is a legitimate private practice, but it is something that does not and should not have any role or place in public policy making. And this viewpoint is illustrated by this slide, in which we see a road sign saying the only wall we need is between church and state. And so, in other words, this viewpoint says that religion and public policy should be strictly separated from each other, that religion should not influence what happens in public life. Of course, the obviously false premises and assumptions lying behind such a demand is cultural relativism and the idea that religion has nothing to say to the broader society. So let's think about this approach to the privatization of religion. By its very nature, Christianity is intended to be a publicly lived out and holistic way of life. To privatize it is to emasculate it or to rob it of its power and to make the state into an idol of power. We cannot let others dictate where and how much we can practice our faith. For example, see Acts chapter 4, verses 19 and 20. We are called by God to impact and influence the world around us. Now, there is also the theocratic approach to dealing with pluralism. And in this view, the solution to the problem of pluralism is to re-establish Christianity as the religion of the state and to enact and enforce specifically Christian laws and moral ideals in the society as a whole. The idea is that because we are all made in God's image, and because God's moral law is designed to maximize human flourishing, it is in the best interest of all to impose Christian morality on the masses, for we are designed to act and believe in God's good ways. Now, there are currently two basic approaches to the theocratic view: the hard theocracy and soft theocracy. Now, I just want to make a note of a comment about this slide. This slide shows a picture of St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow. And the reason why I put this church on this slide is because historically, the Russian government and the Russian Orthodox Church have had a very close relationship. Now, that was not true during the communist era, but it certainly is true today, because after the communist era, the Russian Orthodox Church and the Russian government once again began to have a very close relationship with each other. So let's look at hard theocracy. This is often known as Reconstructionism, theonomy, or dominion theology. This perspective argues that the Old Testament civil laws of Israel should be made the laws of the land today, and that God should be the true king on earth. That's hard theocracy. There is soft theocracy. This view seeks to enact laws in society that are specifically Christian in nature, but not as specific as the dominion theology view. In this sense, then, the Christian seeks to influence social policies and laws in such a way that social morality reflects Christian values and ideals, but is not rooted so firmly and directly in the Old Testament. And one example of this would be how American money has the words "In God We Trust" written on them. So this would be an example of soft theocracy. And actually, as we're going to see later, this is in reality, the words "In God We Trust" on American money is actually an example of civil religion, which we'll get to a little later. So let's reflect on the theocratic approach to pluralism. Placing one's hope in politics rather than God is one problem with this approach. History shows us that human nature is always corrupted by power, Christian or otherwise. It also tends to become discriminatory and oppressive quite quickly. In its hard form, that is, dominion theology and so forth, it does not show proper sensitivity to and understanding of the complex nature of the Old Testament laws and their relationship to historical context, history, etc. Lastly, enforcing morality is not the same as engendering a genuinely moral life. In its ideal form, true moral practice is meant to be something that flows from the heart, that is, our character, and is not imposed from without. At the same time, some things should be enforced for the well-being and social harmony of the society as a whole. Discerning what these moral aspects are that should be enforced in society is a crucial aspect of Christian public life and participation within society. So these are some of the dangers of the theocratic approach. Let's talk about civil religion. This is an attempt to create a religious base for society that incorporates the best of all religions and provides a morality that almost everyone can agree with. The idea is to create a moral and religious perspective that is sufficiently vague and ambiguous that can be embraced by a broad base of people in society. This way, sectarianism can be avoided and the majority of people can benefit from the commonality it provides. And so here we have a picture of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., where we have religious language employed here. In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever. So this is religious language, and this is part of civil religion as it is practiced in the United States. Now, civil religion is not limited just to the United States. We've seen examples of civil religion in other countries as well. The problem with this view is that it tends to please no one, and it creates a new God in the form of the state. If a society is truly pluralistic, it is unlikely to find such a shared moral base anyway. What tends to happen is that the state enforces its civil religion in such a way that it becomes acceptable to no one in particular. And the state tends to demand that the members of society ascribe to its ideals to the extent that the state becomes a new word of God. A new word for God, a new word for God. This highlights the biggest problem with this view. It becomes idolatry. It becomes a replacement for the faithful service of the one true God. So, how should Christians respond to the challenges of pluralism? There are a number of ways that we can live out the Christian faith within our pluralistic societies. Here are some of them. We can recognize that Christianity, we can work towards the recognition of and practice of Christianity as a legitimate voice within our pluralistic society. Other religions and perspectives also have a legitimate voice to be defended and heard as well, not just Christianity. As Christians, we should defend the rights of others to be heard, even as they themselves should be given the chance to be heard. At the same time, we should make our voice heard too, and not keep quiet about our faith or how our faith interacts with various issues in our society. There should also be an acceptance of the limits of public policy. Not all Christian ideals can or even should be publicly enforced through laws. Some things are better enacted through humble service and exemplary practice before the society at large. We are called to live by a much higher standard, and one which cannot be lived apart from the empowerment of the Holy Spirit. For example, Christians are not only called to not have premarital sex, they are also called to treat people of the opposite sex with the utmost respect and concern. Another example would be the prevention of harm to others. This is a basic social expectation, but Christians are expected not only to not harm others, but to do good to others, including their enemies and those who actively hate and oppose them. Christian influence, then, can be in the form of social, political, and legal activism, but within important boundaries and parameters. Christians must recognize their need to impact the society, but not through legal and political means alone, or even primarily. Other means are exemplary and spiritual in nature, including things like having an excellent moral life, actively serving the community, and spending much time in prayer for the community. In addition, Christians need to be discerning about what aspects of their moral life should be required of all citizens and what aspects are only expected of Christians because they are Christians. There are also tactical considerations concerning ways to publicly argue for and persuade others of the Christian perspective. Appeal to the Bible as a source of authority, for example, may not be the best way to convince people in a pluralistic context to do certain things and abstain from others. Appeal to social research and the historical results of certain laws and practices can go a long way towards showing that what moral demand should be enacted and what things should be left to individual conscience. For example, when talking about laws relating to families, instead of referring to biblical teachings about the family and God's design for the family, it would be better when talking with non-Christians to point to studies that show how traditional families with one father and one mother living in a faithful marriage are the best environment for children to grow up in. So we've looked in this video lecture, we've looked at how Christians can respond to the challenges of living in a pluralistic society. So I want to encourage you to continue to think about these things and to come to class with your questions and thoughts and comments about living in a pluralistic society. I look forward to seeing you in class.